When I think of a McLaren, I think of three things. It's going to be fast, it's going to be exotic, and of course, it's going to be bloody expensive. Now, if you told me you also needed your supercar to be comfortable, McLaren wouldn't probably be my first choice. Now that brings me to this all-new edition for 2020. Meet the McLaren GT, an all-new model that's designed to slot between the 570S and 720S. It's built off of the long-tail design, and McLaren says it's the most comfortable supercar that the company has ever built. So the big question I want answered, with the all-new 2020 McLaren GT, has McLaren succeeded in blurring the line between a supercar and a GT car? That's what we're here to find out. So full disclosure, when I think of the perfect expensive GT car, a Porsche 911 Turbo S is the epitome of that. I mean, basically with a GT car, there are some well-known statistics though. They need to be a 2+2. Typically they are front engine, or in the 911 case, rear engine. They offer a decent amount of trunk space, and you can essentially, theoretically, daily drive these cars every day. Now, of course, McLaren is well known for building supercars that are track capable, they're track focused. I've driven already, of course, the 570S, the 570 Spider, and the 720S, but the new McLaren GT is designed to slot right in between the 600 LT and the 720. So this is not necessarily a sports series, nor it is a super series. This is supposed to be a McLaren that you can daily drive on an everyday basis. Now, of course, in typical McLaren fashion, they do it their own way. It's a mid-engine car. It's the only mid-engine GT car in the segment. Technically, the 911 is rear-engined. It is only a two-seater as well. Other competitors have the vestigial back seats, which are useless for actually putting people back there, but you can actually put stuff in there. But of course, McLaren says that this thing has nearly 20 cubic feet of cargo space, so you can actually, put a set of golf clubs back there, 2 roller bags. So for 2 people on a weekend trip, this is supposed to be able to accommodate you. Now, of course, being a McLaren, they have preserve the crazy looks of this thing. It's still one of the most head-turning vehicles out on the road. In fact, in this specific color, which is next to $3,500, my knees essentially went weak when they first dropped off this thing at my house. So when we talk about a McLaren, how could we not oogle over its exterior design? And as you can see, the McLaren GT is instantly recognizable as a McLaren, but it's also introducing some new styling elements to this brand that we haven't necessarily seen before. Now, obviously, this is a mid-engine car, which technically bucks the trend of a GT car. Most are front engine or rear engine if you consider the 911. And this GT version definitely will turn heads just like any other McLaren model. But I will say, I like some of the newer styling designs that they're introducing on this all-new GT. The front fascia, some of you have told me on social media that it looks like a C8 Corvette. That is an insult. Do not say this thing looks like a C8 Corvette. It is a McLaren, and it definitely has a gorgeous look to it. Now, of course, I can see some of the design elements here. The Vette looks pretty exotic nowadays. I like the new headlights here. They're a full LED design. Unlike the 570 and 720S, there is no kind of like eyebrow below the headlight where it had an air intake. I like how they got rid of that. It kind of cleans up the front fascia. Instead, you got a functional intake over here for the brakes, of course. More intakes down here. There's a black painted front splitter. And in this blue color, Ludus blue is what McLaren calls it. It's an extra $7,500. I'm just happy that McLaren sent me a car that is painted in this bright shade of blue. I can't stand it when I see a supercar that's painted in a monotone color like white, silver, black, or gray. Just don't do it. You buy this car to stand out, and the McLaren GT will definitely continue to stand out. Now, of course, this is a very expensive car, and you also probably notice it's very low. Thankfully, this car is included with a front suspension that will raise up with a push of a button so you can clear driveways. My personal driveway is not very steep, but this car manages to actually clear it when you have it raised up. It raises up about 1/4 of an inch when you guys push that button. Now, from the side profile, you can see this is probably my favorite angle of the car because you can really tell this is the long tail version. It's about 5 inches longer than something like the 720S, which is more expensive than this car by about $80,000. At 185 inches long, this is about the same size lengthwise as something like a Honda Civic, which again, it looks much longer than that. It's very low and wide. That's what you associate with a supercar. Now, my tester here has these set of wheels which are around $3,500. They're a 20-inch design at the front, a 21 at the back. I don't particularly love the wheel design. I don't love the way the spokes look. I don't love the finish on them. You can, of course, choose whatever wheel you'd like, depending on how much money you'd like to pay. These are staggered wheels. You have 235s in the front and 295s at the back. Remember, this is not up there with the Ultimate Series McLarens like the Senna. This is more like a Super Series or a Sports Series. It slots between those two vehicles. Now, of course, mid-engine car, you have things like a functional air intake here for the engine because it lives underneath this glass area, another heat extractor over here by the glass, and another air intake over there. The roof, as you can see on this one, is glass. It's also electrochromatic, which means that the glass can actually change the tint at the push of a button. It's kind of similar to what Mercedes has done with their Magic Sky Control. That's like a $6,000 option, of course, if you guys want that, but it's a McLaren. You're going to expect, you know, premium features like that. But overall, this is the profile look of the car that really just makes it stand out. It looks like a supercar, and unlike most GT cars like the Bentley Continental GT or a Porsche 911, this is going to continue to get looks because it just looks like an exotic supercar, and this is the McLaren way. Around back, you can see the look is very similar to other McLaren models. It's got these very skinny horizontal LED strips for the taillights, which are kind of buried into these functional air intake vents, which are great for the overall look of the car. Down here, you can see you've got these massive exhaust tips, which, by the way, you can actually fit your entire fist in there. So this is one serious performance car, and I'll let you guys hear what this engine sounds like real quick. It's mean sounding.
Perfect. Can't find the start button. I pressed the windshield wiper.
Good job, Rob. I was like, what's taking so long?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Anyway,
yes, I'll try it again.
Ready?
Yes. So with exhaust tips that can fit my entire fist in it, you're probably thinking this thing sounds pretty mean. Well, at least I didn't get hit with flames. Now, if you guys have played a lot of video games, the engine literally sounds like a Formula One race car. It really is going to attract a lot of attention. Now, the other styling elements I'm noticing here, the rear diffuser is very cleanly done. I like all the functional air vents down here. You've got rear parking sensors. I also like the way the exhaust tip looks. It's just a very simple, big dual oval design. Now, if you're trying to open up the cargo area, remember, this is the GT. It's supposed to be a practical everyday supercar. I couldn't find an actual release here to open up the rear hatch area, so you can either open it from the inside of the car or you can use the key fob, which, by the way, the key fob, as you can see, same color as the exterior of the car, $500 to get the damn key painted the same color. I think I'd rather just go to Pep Boys and just paint it myself for 20 bucks. But regardless, push this button here and you can see the hatch electrically opens up, which is what you expect when you spend $250,000 on a car like this. And once you open this up, it's absolutely beautiful. Look at all this forged carbon fiber here. This is the new style carbon fiber that is more expensive. This is the modern way to produce it. The entire body is made of carbon fiber, so that's where your $250,000 is going. And unlike other McLaren models that I've shown you the 570 and the 720, you can't see the engine over here because it's covered up with this NASA-inspired material that's supposedly resist fire and heat. But this gives you a total of nearly 20 cubic feet of space when you include the trunk space up back here, and of course the front, which McLaren says you'll be able to fit 2 carry-on roller bags or a set of golf clubs back here if you guys do golfing. Now, obviously it looks like a supercar, feels like a supercar as well from behind the wheel, but this is a GT car, so the interior, McLaren says they've added a couple of extras in here, a couple of niceties to make this thing feel even more luxurious. So probably the coolest thing about owning a McLaren are its dihedral doors. What does that mean? Well, when you push this button over here and lift the door up, I mean, come on, this is the most badass part about a McLaren. A lot of the aftermarket companies try to copy these doors all the time, and it just works on this car. Now, getting in this thing, let's talk about the interior, because once you sit your butt down in here, and let me open up this door for my camera guy here, and show you guys this bespoke white interior. It's actually a white on blue interior, and this interior is absolutely gorgeous. It's actually about $9,500 extra. It's part of like an upgraded premium package that my tester has that includes these upgraded Sport Recaro bucket seats that adjust in like 12, 15 different ways. You've got leather stitching everywhere. In fact, when I first sat in this car, it just smells like money. It smells expensive in here, and everything in this car just feels like it's very special. And that's the point of buying a McLaren like this. I mean, sure, I've driven cars like the Acura NSX, for example, which is around $180,000. And this interior just feels very unique. There's nothing in here that's really shared with any other type of car, and that's what's very important. Now, getting in this car and starting it up, the start-stop button is right here. Oh gosh. Okay, so looking at the rest of this interior, I'm gonna leave it in comfort, but I actually wanna switch it really quick just to active to sport and let you guys hear this engine. It's like, I can't get enough of that engine, so we'll go back into comfort so you guys can actually hear me, because this car does get pretty loud. Now, shutting the window here and looking at the rest of this cabin, this interior is very comfortable in the fact that when I sit in this car, the seats are some of the most comfortable seats I've sat in. They hug you, but the leather is so supple and soft. These are 3-level heated seats as well. I'm surprised to see that there are no cooled seats in this car. I really think that for the money, McLaren needs to offer cooled seats, so I'm a little surprised as to why there are no cooled seats. In terms of the rest of the interior here, you can see a lot of real leather stitching, some piano black plastic, some real aluminum trim. Even the paddle shifters here are aluminum, and they're actually attached to each other. You can feel how expensive they sound, and just the real metal. They actually feel very sturdy, like you could actually shank somebody with these paddle shifters if you rip them off the steering wheel. There's more leather stitching all over the door panels over here. You can see my tester has the upgraded Bowers & Wilkins sound system, which if you guys get tired of listening to that engine, the stereo sounds pretty damn good as well. The steering wheel, as you can see, it is a powered tilt and telescoping design, which is nice. The seat controls, however, annoy the crap out of me. They're right down here on both sides of the vehicle, so the passenger side's over here, and you basically have to just guess and figure out which button does which. But once you kind of figure it out, the seats adjust in about 14 different ways, and you can get relatively comfortable. There's 2-person memory on both sides of the seats, which is important for something like this. But overall, there are some weird controls in here, which is what you expect with a McLaren. For example, the mirror controls are over here on the dashboard. Your headlight controls are over here. You still have traditional turn signal stalk and wiper locks, and if you want to raise up the front, the button to do that is right over here. And you can also control this stalk over here, where you can adjust this customizable LCD screen, which, by the way, whenever you switch the drive modes, this screen also looks slightly different. Now let's come over here to the head unit of this car, because this is a McLaren sourced 7-inch touchscreen display. I believe it's like a Linux-based operating system, but it's also very unique. I've never seen anything like this. Now, of course, this is kind of the home page, as you can see here. You can access it by pushing this button. You can see there's different audio, media, phone, home link, navigation. When you go to GPS, for example, there's the way the GPS looks. This screen looks great right now on camera, but if you're wearing polarized lenses, the screen completely blacks out, so that's also a very annoying thing. When you put the vehicle into reverse here, you're probably wondering, where's the backup camera? It's over here, which seems like a good idea. It's a decent backup camera, but what if you're turning the wheel trying to back up? You can't see anything because the wheel will block it. So I think McLaren should have put the backup camera over here instead of over there. The rest of this head unit here is relatively straightforward, but I'm sad to report it doesn't have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. For $250,000, no Android Auto and CarPlay? I get it, it's a supercar, but come on, McLaren, just throw that in there. It needs to have that kind of connectivity in today's modern world. Now, there's a couple of shortcut buttons here if you don't want to use the touchscreen, GPS, music, phone. There's a mute button, your fan speed button over here. You have dual zone climate control, which, by the way, this is relatively easy to use. It's just a little bit annoying in the fact that the screen blacks out when you're wearing polarized lenses. I also like how McLaren offers 6 different choices of ambient interior lighting, which the lighting, if you can see right here, actually goes out throughout the rest of the aluminum trim in the cabin. You can change the color based on, you know, whatever color you choose from over here, and you can also adjust between footwell and cockpit lighting. So this is all a very nice system. Now over here you can see there's all these different drive modes, and if you're trying to switch the drive modes, this is for the suspension and this is for the powertrain. You can see there's comfort, sport, and track. This won't do a damn thing unless you push the active button. When you push the active button, that will actually change the drive modes. You can hear the engine actually change its pitch as it goes into a loud exhaust mode. There's also a launch control feature, which McLaren has frustratingly disabled for my 3 days that I have this car. car, so I won't be able to actually launch the car, which sucks. But this car also has things like auto start stop. You have your hazard switch over here, and then the 7-speed dual clutch is controlled by this push button transmission selector over here. There's no park for this car. If you're trying to park the car, you put it in neutral and you pull the parking brake here, and that is park. There's no actual park because this is a dual clutch transmission. Open this up, which is a little finicky. You can see there's some decent storage in here. There's 3 cup holders if you're looking at the cup holders here. So for a supercar, it has a decent amount of storage. This actually will perfectly fit your cell phone in these little pockets right here, which is nice. And then if you're looking for something like a glove box here, I'm sorry, that is not included on this car. But above me, what is included is this very slick electrochromatic roof, which, by the way, it's in its darkest setting now. I want you to just look. As I touch this button here, the roof just magically lets in more light. Push this again. I mean, that is pretty slick. This is like $6,000 extra, and it's worth every penny, especially since this cockpit does get pretty hot. So I think McLaren really needs to add cooled seats, and they also need to add Android Auto and CarPlay. Obviously, the interior is nice. The exterior turns heads, but this is a McLaren. So let's try a quick little acceleration run here. And you know what the crazy thing is I can't even use the launch control in this car because McLaren has frustratingly disabled the launch control, but just like the 720S that I drove last year, this thing has a comical amount of turbo lag, and when the turbos kick in at around 3,500 RPM, you better hang on because this engine is the same 4-liter engine from the 720S, just detuned slightly. So ordinarily, this is the part where I would show you the beautiful engine that McLaren will showcase here at the back. Unfortunately for the GT model, you can't see any of it because it's covered up by that material that allows you to have more cargo space. But when you look underneath this area here, if you're a McLaren technician, you're gonna find the same 4-liter bi-turbo, a twin turbocharged V8 that you find in the 720S. Now, of course, in the GT, it's been detuned by about 100 horsepower. This still makes 612 horsepower and 495 pound-feet of torque. 612 is a very good number. It's right in line with cars like the Porsche 911 Turbo S, an Aston Martin DB11, and of course a Bentley Continental GT. Now all of that power goes out through a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. It's McLaren's own design, and this car, unlike most of the competition, which is all-wheel drive, is actually a rear drive car. Now you may be thinking, why is it not all-wheel drive? Because McLaren is all about lightweight, and this car as it sits weighs around 3,314 pounds, which makes it about 1,500 pounds lighter versus something like a Bentley Continental GT, a whopping 400 pounds lighter than something like a 911 Turbo S. Now, of course, with the performance, this is a McLaren. The company says you'll get to 60 in right around 3.1 seconds, and this thing will reach a top speed of around 204 miles an hour. So those are supercar numbers for me. Now, of course, fuel economy, in case you guys care, this is rated at 15 in the city, 22 on the highway. So not bad MPG on the highway. It has about a 19-gallon gas tank, and please be sure and put premium gas in this thing. Okay, so I can't actually show you the engine because it's been lined with this fabric that's NASA inspired that's supposed to resist heat and keep cool so you can actually put stuff back there. But 612 horsepower. Now, I will admit that for a McLaren, the engine isn't quite as loud as I thought it would be. I mean, it sounds good, but you really have to get the revs up on this thing for it to actually make a decent noise. It doesn't have the same kind of noise that you get from like a Bentley V or W12 or a Porsche Flat 6. But man, this thing feels like a supercar from behind the wheel. But the one thing that really surprises me is when you switch the drive modes into like sport or comfort, this thing actually rides incredibly well. I am super impressed with how comfortable the ride is. This is way more comfortable than the last 720S that I drove, which already for me had a pretty comfortable ride. Now, obviously, the GT is a pretty low car, and thankfully it has the ability to raise up its nose if you guys have to park this thing or get it up a steep driveway. Now, I wouldn't say it raises the nose up high enough to clear like really steep driveways, but it's not bad to the point where you're not going to be worrying about scraping that nose on this thing, which is a constant first world problem when you drive a supercar like this. Now, I keep calling it a supercar because it feels like a supercar from behind the wheel, but it also feels like a supercar that's been held back like electronically somehow. The steering in this car, even in track, is very quick and communicative, but it's also a little bit numb. The brake pedal in this car, McLaren does like a brake-by-wire system, so you have to really push hard on the pedal, and then when you do, it really bites hard, but initially it's a little soft. And there is just comical amounts of turbo lag in this thing. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, when it's in its comfort mode, will seek out the higher gear possible to get better fuel economy, which is kind of annoying, but you kind of solve that by driving it in the sport setting or the track setting. And visibility in here is actually not bad because it's a mid-engined car. The front is very short. The side mirrors are also a fairly good size. Unfortunately, McLaren doesn't put any driver assistance tech in this car, which I know it's a McLaren. You're supposed to drive this thing, but come on, guys. This is your GT car. I'm supposed to be able to daily drive this thing every day. And blind spot monitoring would have been nice. Automatic emergency braking would have been nice. And I love the paddles with this thing. They're actually a metal paddle shifter. Listen to the noise that this engine makes. Holy shit. It feels like a race car engine when I'm going through the gears. Oh my God, this is incredible. And the brakes are so strong. It really just transmits so much confidence to the driver. Oh, this is just as good as a Porsche PDK for sure. I mean, this is supposed to be a GT car, but I'm too busy having fun flooring it. Oh my God, I probably sound like a complete idiot in this thing, but that's the whole point of a McLaren. It just makes you feel like a supercar. It makes you feel like you're driving a car that's special. And I'm not entirely sure you're gonna get that same special feeling out of a Porsche 911. What's crazy to me is this is a rear drive car, but it puts the power down so incredibly well. It's so balanced. It weighs around 3,300 pounds and it just handles well. I just don't like how the steering feels a little bit numb. I don't like how the transmission seeks out the topper gears when you leave it in its full automatic mode. They have softened everything on purpose to make this thing a little bit, you know, easier to daily drive, which I applaud them for, but you can tell when you drive this thing hard, it wants to be driven faster. It's got the basic, you know, mechanics, the bones of a track car, because that's what McLaren is known for building. So to drive it as a GT car is nice that it can do that, but the beauty about this thing is it has that dual personality. When you put it into track mode, it will, you know, put this huge smile on your face. You'll be laughing hysterically like an idiot when you're driving this thing. And the beauty as well is you'll be comfortable. I find these seats to be really soft, which they better be because this interior is an extra $9,500, but the leather is just so supple. It's very much bespoke, everything in here. You can custom tailor this car to exactly the way that you want it to be. And that's kind of the point when you're buying a car like this. I mean, it starts at over $200,000. Everything else in the segment does, although the McLaren is slightly more expensive than things like the Porsche 911 Turbo S or the Bentley Continental GT or the Aston Martin DB11. But I would argue that this is a McLaren and it will attract more attention than those vehicles. And this thing seriously broke necks everywhere I took it. And there's nothing worse than being stuck on a curvy back road in this beautiful McLaren with over 600 horsepower and to be stuck behind a Toyota Prius Prime. Ugh. Now in terms of fuel economy, this is rated at 15 in the city, 22 on the highway, just for shits and giggles in case you care. The trip computer's been saying I've been averaging around 15 mpg. Now on the highway, it did get up to around 21 mpg, which is pretty good, actually, considering this thing has a 19-gallon gas tank. You'll be looking at, 300-mile fill-ups, especially if you leave it in comfort setting and you're disciplined with your right foot, which definitely with the 3 days that I've had this car, has took a lot of restraint on my part to actually not go into the throttle, but also I don't really need any more speeding tickets, and this thing is legitimately the biggest cop magnet, probably the most cop magnet press car that I've ever had in the last 8 years that I've been getting press cars. Now, of course, being a McLaren, this thing is not perfect. It's far from perfect, and these things are hand-built, and as you can hear, There is a slight rattle coming from this part of the door pillar. I actually hear it on the passenger side as well. It's very annoying to hear that rattling. I mean, of course, that rattling is solved by just putting your foot down and listening to the twin turbo V8, but for a car that costs this much, I don't like hearing the rattle. So for those of you who actually buy one of these, I would be pissed and I would be taking it back to the dealer and asking them to fix that annoying rattle. The 7-inch touchscreen display here is very much bespoke. It's McLaren's own design. It annoyingly lacks Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and with my polarized lenses on, I can't even see the damn screen. It's completely blacked out in this bright sunlight, which is annoying, and you can't get cooled seats on this car. I mean, sure, it's got air conditioning in it, which is lovely, but why no cooled seats at this price point? I would like to see some cooled seats. So McLaren, you need to work on fixing those issues. I get it. These cars are not, everyday cars. People don't buy a crap ton of these. But for the money that I'm spending, this is where something like a Porsche 911 Turbo S would be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit easier to live with. So I've had this car a total of 3 days, and I have to say, McLaren has to pick it up tomorrow, and I'm sad. I really want this car for like another week or two. McLaren just sent it to me for a little bit longer, but let me get out of this thing, which isn't actually as hard to get out of as I thought. After spending 3 days with the McLaren GT, I must admit, I was skeptical about a McLaren that could actually be daily driven. I mean, look at this thing. I got attention everywhere I went. I felt like a celebrity. I got attention from people, the police. Luckily, I didn't get pulled over for speeding at all, which was a big win for me. And really, the McLaren GT has so many things about it that really will surprise a lot of people. First of all, the ride quality of this thing is insanely comfortable. I was not expecting this car to ride the way it did. Its engine is just ferocious. It feels like an F1 car. It goes like an F1 car. It has lots of turbo lag, so it feels like a supercar when I'm driving it. But I also don't like the fact how McLaren has kind of artificially toned down this car to feel more comfortable. The steering isn't quite as responsive as a 720S. The ride quality is a little bit softer, but the whole car itself still feels like a race car that has been programmed to feel a little bit more comfortable, which I get it. This is the McLaren way of doing a GT car. But really, there's also times where you look at the competition set. You look at a Porsche 911 Turbo S, which has the vestigial back seats. You look at an Aston Martin DB11, which is just going to be a little bit more comfortable. And this car, while it is comfortable for McLaren, it still doesn't have quite as much room on the inside. It has tons of cargo space, and it's also priced relatively well within the competition set. If you're looking to actually buy one of these things, it starts at $210,000, chump change, right, for a McLaren. Now, of course, this is about $20,000 more than something like a 570S. If you're looking at the 720S, this is about $90,000 less expensive. Now, of course, my tester here, with all the options that it has about $53,000 worth of options, stickers, for a grand total of just over $262,000, which is a lot of money. A Porsche 911 Turbo S is going to be a little bit less expensive than this car by about $5,000. But of course, with a McLaren, you can customize this to exactly the way you like it. There's so many bespoke options, so many colors, so many different ways you can custom tailor these, because remember, these are all hand built in England to basically however way you'd like, because McLaren is a very bespoke company. They build cars to order. So really, McLaren has very much succeeded in building a supercar that blends the characteristics of a GT car. But if you're thinking this is more of a traditional GT car, or you want a more traditional GT car, my recommendation would be to also look at the competition. But I would also argue this is going to attract a lot more attention. And when you're spending this kind of money, attention is really what you're after, and the performance. So with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2020 McLaren GT. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.